Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. Today I'm going to talk about something called phenomenology. Phenomenology is where what you're interested in is what was the experience someone was having, or what was the experience that several people were happening. What was it that actually happened and what was the experience of it? I discovered phenomenology when I did my dissertation some decades back now, and I wanted to look into what's it like for senior execs, what's it like for them when they use external consultants. And I did a lot of research to find out about pre-existing research on this question, and there was none. I couldn't find any. I found a lot of information on what are the best ways to be a good consultant, what are the best ways to choose consultants and use consultants, what sort of results are achieved by consultants, that kind of thing, all very pragmatic. But there was nothing about what does it actually feel like for the client. And at the time, I was doing a master's degree, and I looked at the various different research methodologies, and the one that fitted for me was one called phenomenological research. So if you're someone who's interested in how did somebody feel when something was happening? What was their experience? What was their inner landscape, as they were experiencing what was happening? Then that is phenomenology, that you are being a phenomenologist. You may not be able to say it, but you are interested in phenomenological inquiry when you're doing that. And I think some of us are very drawn to that because we feel like the experience we have of something is of prime importance. In many ways, it's more important than the outcome or the tangible benefits or results of it, the experience along the way. This is another people who say, well, the purpose of life is to live a good life, to enjoy your life. That's a phenomenological perspective on it. Whereas someone who says, purpose of your life is to earn a lot of money, have lots of children, have lots of relationships, or have one perfect relationship, or have a big house, or have a fast car, or have 20 fast cars, or, these are not phenomenological perspectives. These are much more tangible, objective outcomes that someone is focusing on, which are not bad or wrong. It's just that some people tend to focus more in that direction, and some tend to focus more in the experiential or the phenomenological direction. And when I stopped doing executive coaching back in 2017, and by the time I finished, a lot of my clients who'd been CEOs and board directors of one sort or another had moved on from those roles, and quite a few of them had taken on a new role called non-executive chairman. And a non-executive chairman is somebody who is the chair of the board for a company or an organization or a charity, whatever it may be, and they are non-executive. What that means is they're not accountable or responsible for executing the delivery and the functioning of the business. They're non-executive, so they're involved, they're participating in the board, they're chairing the board, they're supervising it, but they're not responsible for the results. They're not accountable for the results. And very often they're not actually employed by the business. Very often they are on a contract, which could be a 5-year contract typically. And some organizations will only allow a non-executive chairman to have one contract, and other organizations will allow those contracts to be renewed potentially if everyone's happy and the non-exec chairman wants to do that. So some of these people were sharing with me what this was like, and I became more and more curious and fascinated about it. And I felt there could be something important to be learned by conducting a phenomenological inquiry with these people who were non-exec chairmen. So I interviewed them and analysed what they had to say and wrote an eBook. Now, why I'm talking about this is because I want to highlight the value of inquiring into someone's experience of something, what it feels like for them. It's the what was that like for you, or what is that like for you question. I actually think that having space in our minds for those sorts of questions is really important, because those sorts of questions connect in directly with empathy. They also connect in directly with learning about the world around us. And part of the world around us is made up of what the humans around us are experiencing and what it feels like for them. So we need that information to have empathy, but also simply to be informed so that we know more about the world that we are in. And that gives us information to help us choose how we respond to that, and to do that intelligently with emotional intelligence and emotional competence. So this ebook is of interest if you are a non-exec chairman, or if you are someone considering becoming a non-exec chairman, or if you're someone who deals with non-exec chairman. Because what this ebook does, it's actually called Autonomy in Relationship, the human side of being a non-exec chairman. Because that will help you to, if you are in that role, enjoy it better, enjoy it more and get more out of it and contribute more. Or if you are someone who deals with one of those people, it will help you to deal with them more effectively and in a way that's more enjoyable for both of you. And if you're considering taking on a role like that, this information is invaluable. Another aspect of it that really struck me is in our world, what most of us tend to do is to categorize the people in our world who we have around us, and also people who we're never going to meet, as real people and not real people, or ordinary people and not ordinary people. And by that, I mean, we decide, whether it's unconsciously or not, we decide who are the human beings who are part of the same category or demographic as we are. This used to be called people like us. So the people who we think are everyday people, if we think of ourselves as everyday people like us, or let's say we are someone who's done a lot of enlightenment work, we might decide that other people who've done a lot of enlightenment work are people like us, and the other people are not. That in some ways they're less real. So listening to this, you may notice a reaction coming up in your body. And if you're noticing that reaction, then I invite you just to notice it. Notice what it feels like. Because what I'm talking about is a subconscious dynamic. It comes from a survival mechanism, which helps us to identify who is our family, who's our tribe, who are the people we can trust, who are the people we're going to put ourselves out for as part of our survival and survival of the group. And it's completely natural and it's absolutely fine. However, now that we've got the capacity for conscious thought, conscious reflection, depth reflection, critical reflection, we also have the capacity now to take note of when we're doing that unconsciously in ways which may not be helpful. So how this relates back to the topic of the non-exec chairman. In the corporate world, many people consider, without realizing it, unconsciously, think of a non-exec chairman as not like us, almost not a real person, either much wealthier or more powerful or with more authority, that whatever it might be, they're not like us. So in a way, they're less human. And when you've decided that someone is less human, you then don't extend to them the same degree of compassion, empathy, consideration, curiosity, cooperation, fun, engagement, collaboration, and all of the other things that we are more likely to extend to the people who we think of as real people. But if when you read the ebook, you will see that these non-exec chairmen are completely real people. They're real people. The difference is they've had a different path, perhaps than you or I. But they're very much real people. And one of the things they need is for people to realize that. Same with the CEO, but less so, because with the CEO, they have executive accountability, and so do the rest of the board. And actually, so do other people moving down through the organization. They all have executive accountability in terms of being accountable for certain deliverables and functions and activities within the business. Any non-exec chairman or a non-exec director on the board doesn't have that. It immediately puts them in a different category, but they're still just as human. And the more they can remember that and remember, well, of course they remember that because they are human, but the more they can not buy into the unconscious belief that they're not, that may be projected onto them by other people, and more other people remember that about them, the more likely it is that there will be a harmonious, humane, beautiful, creative, interesting set of relationships and dynamic on the board and in the organization. So this actually plays out in all sorts. That's just one example, but there are all sorts of situations where people are self-alienating by unconsciously deciding that other group of people is less human than I am. So some people do it with politicians. They said they actually feel like politicians are less human, or that broadcasters, radio broadcasters, podcast broadcasters, TV broadcasters are less human because they're kind of larger than life. They're you're seeing them on a screen. I think this dynamic first started in the days of the initial days of the silver screen, where there were the black and white silent movies, and suddenly people were watching these people on a screen who were giants. They because at the time you could only watch this in the cinema, and so you'd see someone's face on the screen that was 20 feet high. And these were giants. They were like gods and goddesses in people's estimation. But of course, they were human. And the fact that people forgot that they were human caused all sorts of problems, because sometimes they began to believe that they were other than ordinary humans. And then you'd get all sorts of dynamics like, drugs, promiscuity, all sorts of other things happening, because there was a disconnect from being a natural, ordinary human being. And that still happens now. I actually bumped into an actor who I really like, this actor. I was walking through Soho one day in London, and I was immediately kind of starstruck. I was immediately sort of flushed with this excitement and admiration for this person, and I stopped and said hello, and he said, "Don't be quiet." He wanted to just slink through. He was slinking through, but I'd spotted him because he was coming towards me, and he was very kind. He was kind enough to stand and talk to me for a moment, and then thank me for having a chat, and then off he went. And afterwards, I was just full of the excitement of having met this person, and he is just a human being. The fact that he happens to be an actor who happens to have done some very good roles where he was well cast, good scripts, well produced, well filmed, doesn't make him anything less than an ordinary human being. So in this episode, I'm inviting you to really notice that thing of who are we deciding is not really human? Either they're better than human or not as good as human. Who are we deciding that about, and how's it affecting us, affecting our lives? And I'm also inviting you to read the ebook, Autonomy in Relationship, the human side of being a non-executive chairman, which you can find on beingspace.world/ebooks. And that will be in the show notes. Please check out my other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. And if you'd like to find out about my expansive coaching or my freedom of spirit work, check out beingspace.world or freedomofspirit.world. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time.